in the future.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. Yes. Can you believe it? This is our first show. It is our first show of 2024. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. Yes, it's hey, let's kind of start doing this thing again tonight kind of show. Hope you all are doing well. More about life and times momentarily. Well, welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator, editor, and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards and across the country. You can join us at the end of the week, every once in a while, or maybe every week, for our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And you can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast. You can support this show by heading on over to Patreon, supporting us for as little as $5 a month. Just go to patreon.com/rcpress for all the details. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. And if you're one of our awesome podcast listeners, make sure to give us that 5-star review on whatever platform you listen on, and leave a comment to let folks know why you like the show. Little things like this help other people find the show. And for more PA Progressive Talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you get a stream, and subscribe to his podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Check out the ricksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. I don't know what just happened to my music there. They just completely cut out. I don't know. That's pretty interesting. Well, you know what? I guess it wouldn't be 2024, the beginning of 2024, without something like this, right? So here we go. Anyways, you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And you know where the bodies are buried. Make sure to follow them on Twitter at the Night Caucus. That's at the Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcast wherever you get your podcast. And if you haven't heard, The Signal is a new podcast of the Bucks County Beacon. The Signal is hosted by the Beacon's editor-in-chief, Cyril Mukaleko, and produced by yours truly. Twice a month, The Signal will shine a light on the right-wing extremist currents streaming through Bucks County and beyond. Cyril invites guests who can provide insight, analysis, and organizing solutions so we can steer the community toward calmer, saner, progressive roots. And in case you missed it, the Beacon just also launched their new Gen Z-focused podcast called The Civic Circle. You can check out The Signal at buckscountybeacon.podbean.com. But if you want to check out The Civic Circle, you got to check them out at theciviccircle.podbean.com. Yes, The Civic Circle is a podcast by the Bucks County Beacon, tackling politics and policy from a Gen Z lens. Sarah Zhang, Mallory Marson, and Alexandra Coffey are students from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and once a month they chat about activism, advocacy, and all the political happenings affecting their generation today. We've got a new one dropping soon. Can't wait for that. Attention all you gamers out there. The Game Inn is a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything from retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. And kids get discounts with every A on the report card. Check them out on their Facebook page and follow them on Twitter at The Game Inn. That's with 2 N's. Got a question about a game, looking for something hard to get, shoot them a message or drop them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. And look, if you ever find yourself in the Kutztown area, you've got to check out the Heart and Hearth Deli and Smokehouse. That is located at 466 West Main Street. It's kitty corner from Kutztown University's campus. The Heart and Hearth is an American bistro featuring barbecue and French-inspired fare, all with locally sourced and organic ingredients. You got to go check it out. Their food is absolutely spectacular. You go in there, seek out Colleen. She's the chef and she's the owner, and tell her that Raging Chicken sent you. Special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song that just disappeared in the middle of the intro. There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff and follow him on his YouTube page and on Twitter at Song a Day Man. That's with 2 N's, at Song a Day Man on Twitter. Well, that is quite a start to the beginning of the year to find my music go out in the middle of the intro. But nonetheless, I am very happy to be back. Emily, yay, good to see you. Yes, I am back. Emily, thank you for reaching out to for me during our little hiatus there and making sure everything was all right. It was it was quite a ride, I have to say. So we were kind of off air a little bit longer. Ross, what's going on, man? Great to see you. Great to see you. We were off air for a little longer than expected. Part of it had to do with, if you remember, for those folks who were tuning in at the end, back in November, December, I got COVID back in around Thanksgiving. Then shortly after that, my wife got COVID. And then we kind of rolled quickly into the holidays, and then we were getting our kind of interior of our house painted. And it took, instead of something that was we thought in our brains, I don't know why, that it was going to take like a week and a half, ended up taking about 2.5 weeks from kind of start to finish. And our whole house was basically consolidated into our basement, which is also where I tend to do this show. And then as a kicker, went to go see my folks, kind of upstate New York. And as a kicker, right as the semester was my semester, because I, teach at Kutztown University, and right about the time that I was getting ready to go back to campus, I got sick once again. This time, if you remember, I had cellulitis. I got this recurring cellulitis, and it just kind of knocked me out for like a week. Still recovering from it, if you can believe it. But so it was a little bit, kind of like a stumbled limp into 2024. But it is what it is, and here we are, 2024. Yes, Ross said, hey, folks are driving around trying to gather petitions and signatures. That's absolutely true. Don Kern was by our house yesterday, picking up our signatures here. I know we've got some great folks out from the Penridge Democrats, but out gathering signatures, people from all over Bucks County. I heard we're out there getting signatures to get Democratic Party candidates on the ballot for the fall's election, both for the primary coming up and for the fall's election. So it's quite it's been quite a kind of cool. It's been interesting to see. There feels to be a very different energy in the air in 2024. In some ways. Okay. I don't want to kind of get too far out. I don't want to get all Pollyannish on you here or anything, but, I remember, when I first moved to the kind of Percy area, I remember trying to search out and try to find who was, is there a Democratic Party organization in the area? Are there progressives in the area? Not knowing where to go. Right. Nobody ever came and knocked on my door. Nobody ever kind of asked me for my signature on their petition. If I wanted to kind of sign somebody's petition, help them get them on the ballot, I had to go kind of find where there were people. At the beginning of 2024, got multiple notifications on both email and social media, individual messages. We're hearing both from the Bucks County Democratic Party as well as the Penridge Democrats and other associated organizations who are proactively contacting everyone and out there hitting the streets already at the beginning of 2024. It really is, when I step back, it's a sea change, and I think that the victory in the Penridge School District, the victory of the Penridge, Penridge Community Alliance, all the candidates who basically overturned the extremist school board majority and now have a new majority are starting things off at the right foot. They're brought sanity back to the school board. And I think, and that also happened in the Central Bucks School District, right? And it should be said that both of those victories, they owe their victories in large part from grassroots parents and community organizing. Right. And that is what builds movements long term. Right. And so these folks didn't just to kind of Democratic Party at the national level didn't say, oh, Bucks County is an important county, flew a bunch of people in, gathered signatures, then kind of disappeared and kind of, until, 4 years later. No, these are kind of homegrown organizations now that are doing just amazing work, you know? And so I don't know. That's what I mean by there's a different feeling. Now, of course, there's a lot of reasons why this doesn't feel like the beginning of, you know, something new, like a hopeful time. Especially if we're starting to look at places like what's happening in kind of Israel and Gaza, just kind of genocidal action on part of the Israeli government, and the inability of so many, say, commentators and even activists in some cases, but particular commentators in the media to be able to separate out like the actions of a government from the Jewish people, for example, right? Instead of kind of saying like, okay, look, we can make a distinction here between the actions of a government and people as a whole, right? And the same thing when we're talking about Hamas and the Palestinian people, right? We should be able to kind of make the distinction between Hamas as a terrorist organization that carried out a massacre on Jewish civilians and the Palestinian people, right? So we start off the beginning of the beginning of this year too with news coverage that's still frustrating. Now I have to say, because a lot of the kind of the mass movements that have been taking place, the UN's action, being able to kind of call what was happening in Gaza as kind of genocidal action. There's war crimes that are happening there. The Israeli government is carrying out war crimes, right? So there's a lot of things that we're going to sit there, but that's bad, right? We see now that the expansion of U.S. involvement in these, the Horn of Africa. We've still got the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. So I mean, yes, there's a lot of that stuff that's bad. 2023 was the warmest year on record, right? We kind of blipped above the 1.5 degrees of warming like ever before. So there's lots of that stuff, right? That is our challenges now and kind of long term. But there's something about, for me, I guess, and I should say this too as well, that all those things that I just kind of, that short litany, that's certainly not everything, that I just ran through, really got to me, in ways that I don't think it had before. And I spoke to a little bit about this during my last show last show of 2023. And, I've been trying to ask myself, is this what burnout feels like? Because I've been in a certain kind of funk that I haven't been in, kind of for a while around this stuff. And it's just like, and it's weird because that's happened at the same time that there's amazing organizing happening right in my own backyard. It's just this kind of weird, whatever, individual kind of mental space or whatever heck you want to talk about that I'm in. But there's something about, despite those things, to see the kind of proactive work that's going on and just the amazing, genuine people that are involved in organizing is something else. And, as much as it feels super good to know that we had these victories in the Pennridge School District, or that in Central Bucks School District, I'm very, very aware that what is happening now in the Souderton School District, what is happening in the Kutztown School District, what is happening in several other school districts, kind of even just kind of within like short driving distance of Bucks County, is troubling. And it goes to show that, the victories that were won in Central Bucks and Pennridge were hard-won victories, but those opponents, the people that seek to decimate public education, are not going away. Those people that are kind of like, on the Christian nationalist band or train, I should say, are not going away. So there's a lot on our plate. In addition to that, of course, it's 2024, right? We are in a presidential election year, and we've got a party, the Republican Party, that is dominated by Donald Trump. Doesn't matter how many crimes the guy commits, doesn't matter how many court cases, it doesn't matter the fact that the guy has committed all sorts of kind of crimes against the Constitution and the kind of the U.S. government and everything. It doesn't matter to a large section, or, you know, really the dominance of the Republican Party, as we've seen in the dwindling numbers of candidates running against him. I mean, we're down to one now, right? There were Republican Party debates, presidential debates, but Trump didn't show up, and you know, they were just kind of a sideshow. They were kind of like, oh, hey, we're kind of doing our kind of due diligence over here with these debates, but they weren't really watched very much. Nobody seemed to really care about him, right? Anybody who is any kind of real, you know, pays close attention to politics whatsoever knows that, you know, that's nothing. Trump controls the party, and certainly that's true. Now, it's interesting to see Nikki Haley going up against Donald Trump for the Republican nomination. But let's face it, is that there's the divisive politics that have marked, you know, the past decade aren't going away anytime soon. And I guess my hope for 2024 going forward is that we've got some at least practical hands-on models of some things that are of alternatives, right? This kind of community-based organizing that we've seen throughout Bucks County and beyond. And yes. Look, I am well aware that there's amazing organizing that's going on in Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and all this. But, you know, in Pennsylvania, I've always had this. Okay, let me put it this way. I had, you know, I used to live in Washington, D.C. before I came here. I may have even told this story before, but I loved living in DC. I had great friends in DC. I loved where I lived. I loved like the people that I worked with, although the pay was absolutely crap. And I had an opportunity to stay there, right? Long term. But I chose to come and teach at Kutztown instead of GW. And it was a hard decision, right? To leave a place that I had, you know, built some roots and some friends and stuff, and kind of come to and move to Pennsylvania, a place that I had never lived before, right? I'm originally from, you know, kind of central New York. And I remember choosing a job at Kutztown and thinking about kind of organizing and thinking about the history of labor within the state of Pennsylvania and all the kind of rich heritage in this stuff. And I was, you know, talking to somebody down in DC about this, who I worked with at GW for a bit, and, you know, talked about the kind of importance of organizing in, you know, in small towns and small cities, and Pennsylvania seemed ripe with that. And I remember them just laughing about it, right? And basically saying, you know, kind of reinforcing that stereotype that you always hear about Pennsylvania, right? You know, it's kind of like Philadelphia and Pittsburgh and Alabama in between, right? The great, you know, T of kind of red that goes to the state. But it never, ever sat right with me. You know, even when they were kind of laughing, I remember, what are you laughing at? It's like, well, what kind of way, how do you imagine social change, let alone something like, you know, this person's case, like revolutionary change, when you're focused solely on the cities, you know, focused solely on the kind of center stuff. And, you know, and I get it, right? I mean, you live in cities, you're surrounded, they tend to be kind of much more liberal. There's a lot more kind of political engagement that's happening for the most part in cities. But you also have some pretty deep despair in cities, right? You also have some of the perfect examples of the deepest brutality of our kind of capitalist system happening in cities, right? But I get it, right? Because you get around a lot of other kind of like-minded people that you can actually do organizing and have an impact. I get it. I understand why that's invigorating. I lived in places like that. I love places like that. But it seems to me that there's something wrong with, you know, writing off the vast majority of other people to live in other places. And it seemed to me one of these like failures on you know, of the left side of the spectrum to really think about what it means to organize with people, right? Now, there's been huge changes, right, in organizing models, since I first, moved to Pennsylvania in 2002. Right? Huge changes, right? The whole idea about deep canvassing, the whole idea of, what we saw, the inroads, the kind of organizing the DSA did in kind of some areas, which are focused on, kind of everyday kind of concerns. We've seen stuff around school boards, right? Things like this, where there's that kind of emergent sense of organizing that is not rooted in, okay, I just need to be around a whole bunch of other people that are just like me, right? And in some ways, when I'm not kind of in the thick of trying to, wonder, like, is my kid going to be okay going through the school system? Like that's weighing on my brain, to like really thinking about it. It's like, it's impressive. And I can't emphasize enough or kind of give accolades enough to the folks who organize here in Penridge, in the Penridge School District, right? Because this, is, everybody will agree, one of the more conservative areas in Bucks County. And so, but they won, right? I mean, these folks that organized, they won. And why did they win? They didn't win because they said, oh, here's our 5-point kind of ideological platform that's consistent with, a left Democratic kind of thing. No. They talked about what is most meaningful in the community and kind of, and taking care of each other. They talked about what is sane and what is good for our kids. They talked about wanting to have a community that wasn't based upon the kind of like just nastiness and vitriol that was brought by these kind of extreme, moms for liberty types on the board. Now there's still two there, but they're no longer in the majority. So that's incredibly hopeful, right? But there is something, and Emily said, yeah, look, Groundhog Day, when I was, talking about the presidential races. Yeah, it is kind of like, here we are again. But I'm hoping, and this is where I worry that I'm getting, Pollyannish about it, right? But I'm hoping that there's some of this new organizing that, began with, the Women's March, that began with, the Black Lives Matter protests, that began with, the rise of DSA, a whole bunch of like grassroots movements that have been working to find their feet, and that has been, getting down to like some of the, brass tacks of organizing we get in our communities. I'm hoping some of that kind of moves forward, right, as we're moving into this presidential election series. One of the things that I stopped doing for a bit was watching any kind of cable news, right? I literally took probably a month break from watching cable news at all. I didn't watch a ton of it before, but, I used to like to, I used to watch like Rachel Maddow and Chris Hayes. And then, Rachel Maddow, of course, she disappeared for a while, and then she only came back for one night a week. And frankly, for a long time before that, she was so focused on Russia that I just kind of lost the thread of really kind of interest in following something so closely. I mean, there's more going on in the world than Russia. Not that wasn't an insignificant story, but it's not the only story, right? And I felt that was a real loss, that she focused so much on that. And Chris Hayes, again, when he first had his show on Saturday mornings, I used to love that. I used to get up. My kids were like babies. And I used to get up in the morning with them and come down and watch, Chris Hayes' show in the morning. And it's great kind of discussions that would be in these roundtables. And for the most part, that really followed through for his show for a while. And yet, this there was this creeping sense of like, okay, the only thing that he's going to cover, the only thing that anything on MSNBC is going to cover is just going to be the Trump trials. It's going to be the Trump show all over again. And, again, I want to be careful here. I want to say, look, I want to give some nuance here. It's like, Chris Hayes, some of these other shows, they are focusing on some other things, but they're not the lead, right? They're not the majority of it. And instead, it really feels like, okay, if I want to go hang out in the Democratic Party dugout, right? If I want to go hang out on that bench, like with the rest of them, can see what kind of like, what they're rah-rahing about, you can go over there. But it's like official Democratic Party lines and responses, right? Even the ways they're kind of laughing at the ridiculousness of certain things that are happening in our communities, about the absurdity, or the astonishment they had when Trump like took the stand for 5 minutes, like in his trial. The other people are like, my jaw literally dropped. I'm like, really? And I understand that cable news, that's what they do, right? They're into the horse race there, and we're in this kind of bifurcated kind of media system where, everyone's on a team and that's what they're going to do. But we can do better than that. You know what I mean? So anyways, I just, I turned on the other night. I said, okay, you know what? I should probably start, slowly, dipping my toe back in the pool, as it were. And, so I turned on Chris Hayes, and I watched a little bit. And it was, again, the Trump trial, like it just back and forth and back and forth. And you got, like, I'm looking at it, okay, where they're going to get some other stories. They're going to talk about what was happening in Gaza. They were going to, some other story. But I'm 30 minutes into the news show, and they're literally just bringing on more people talking about their opinion about the Trump trial, right? It wasn't even kind of news coverage at that point, right? There was nothing that actually happened other than the fact that the dude stepped on the stand and said like 5 words or something like this. And then that was it. There is no news there, right? Other than a mention of it. And so that has me concerned kind of moving forward, of course, because I think that the ethos of being grounded in the community is going to be so important. So anyways, that, I knew I was going to be kind of a little riffy tonight, if you will, because I really saw this as a kind of getting back. I've got some, we got some kind of good shows. I don't know if you've heard about this. You remember a while ago, just give you a little preview of some stuff that is coming up. If you guys remember Steve Oros, so Steve Oros was the faculty member at Kutztown University who had open heart surgery, and then was the Kutztown University administration was basically going to force him to go back to in-person work, despite the fact that that COVID was still super active in 2021. That COVID was still like on a rampage, and his doctor had basically told him that you can go back to teaching, but you can't go back in person. You have to go back online. And the university refused to make any kind of accommodations to deal with it. That's the short of it. You probably remember the show. It was a fantastic interview. I had Steve on a couple times. Well, anyways, there's a new federal court ruling that just came down, I think, about a week and a half ago, that Steve won another case. And this case that Steve Oros won against the university was basically the university appealed, and this goes up to the federal courts. And the federal courts basically said, no, Kutztown University's administration knowingly put in place a policy that would purposely not provide accommodations for people with disabilities, right? Specifically disabilities that were connected to COVID or something. So if you basically said, I have this condition that I can't be in a classroom because if I get COVID, I'm going to die. They already had a policy put in place behind the scenes that they didn't tell anybody about, but they were operating on, that basically said that we are not going to give that person accommodations. Because Kenneth Hawkinson, the president of the university, was so set on being back in person. He was, determined to do that. Grit and fortitude, right? So anyways, so that case just came down, and Steve is going to be back on the show, potentially even with his lawyer. We're trying to kind of work out some of the details, but Steve will be back on the show in the upcoming weeks. If you remember, I had interviewed some folks back on the during the climate convergence. There's a couple folks, the Coalfield Justice folks, that I kind of interviewed that I should have brought their names up. I should have had all this stuff up, but I don't. So I'm just spacing the name. Reach out to them. Want to have them on the show, talking about kind of organizing, kind of in places like West Virginia and Appalachian, these coal fields, right? And what that kind of organizing looks like, and to have a kind of an organizing model that's rooted in people, right? I mean, so having those folks kind of come back on the show here. Of course, as the election gears up, we're probably going to have some commentators and stuff on. I'm trying to look for somebody right now, to be honest with you, that is willing to come on and talk about Governor Josh Shapiro's new proposal for consolidation of Pennsylvania's public higher education institutions. Obviously, this is something that impacts me directly, because, this is it. But let me give you the idea. The top line of this, and you probably have seen these headlines. It says, I'll give you, this is from the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm just going to read you a couple headlines from around so you get a sense of it. Here's the Philadelphia Inquirer. Governor Josh Shapiro proposes sweeping reform of PA state-funded higher education. Shapiro's three-part plan calls for a cap of $1,000 per semester on the cost of tuition and fees at state-owned universities and community colleges for Pennsylvania, for Pennsylvanians making $70,000 or less. In other words, if your family makes $70,000 or less, there will be a cap on tuition at $1,000 per semester. Now, look, at the money of that, the actual impact of that is a game changer, right? For you to basically be able to say that is going to make higher education accessible for working class in Pennsylvania, that right there, right? Now, we could argue, as you know, I am not a fan of means testing stuff. I believe in universal programs. I think that if you're going to do this, you make this accessible for everyone, right? Instead of it making it something that we're going to pit the family making $69,000 a year against the family making $72,000 a year, right? Because that's essentially, you draw that line at $70,000. That's what you end up doing, right? The people that are just above $70,000 are not going to get that, and they're going to be kind of hit with an extra bill. And that is the kind of gutting of the middle class that has happened kind of consistently. And the Democratic Party has been part and parcel of doing this, right? But nonetheless, all those caveats aside, $1,000 per semester is amazing. Now, how are you going to do this? Right? That's a big question. Well, here's the headline for the New York Times is this: Pennsylvania governor proposes to overhaul the state university system. Governor Josh Shapiro, declaring that the system is broken, plans to place most schools under the same system and lower tuition for low and middle income students. Okay? I want to read you a little bit of what the New York Times article was on this. And this was out from January 26th, right? So a few days ago. So Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania, who has complained that his state's higher education, quote, isn't working, proposed on Friday a sweeping overhaul of the state's sprawling college and university system that would reduce tuition for many students and determine funding for individual schools based in part on their performance. The plan would consolidate 10 of Pennsylvania state universities and all 15 of its community colleges under one governance umbrella, boost state funding for public higher education, and allow students with low to middle incomes to pay only $1,000 a semester in tuition. Most of the plan would not affect Pennsylvania's best-known public universities, Penn State, Pittsburgh, and Temple. And then, quote, after 30 years of disinvestment, too many of our colleges and universities are running on empty and not enough students have affordable pathways into good jobs, Mrs. Shapiro said in a statement. Plans to overhaul have been under development for nearly a year by a working group formed by the governor, who complained publicly shortly after taking office in 2023 about problems in the state's higher education system. Okay. So what this says is it gives you a little bit of a look into this, right? So it's basically saying we're going to take the community college system and Pennsylvania's 10 state universities. Remember, there used to be 14, but the Chancellor Greenstein consolidated 6 of those universities into 2. So now we're down from 14 to 10. And there's been all sorts of problems with those consolidated universities, but I'll put that aside for now. But combine that with 15 of its community colleges and essentially put that all under one governance umbrella. Let me pause here for a second and let you know why this is kind of concern with me and should be concern, I think, of a lot of folks in different sectors. The big question for me is this, and I want to be clear. We do not have all the details about this yet. I have not spoken to my own faculty union about what their perspective is on this yet. I've read some things from there, but one of those flags that's kind of sitting there in the air for one of those, I shouldn't say flag, but one of those kind of like, you know, flashing lights that's saying, hey, pay attention to this. If you know anything about unions, you have a union contract with a particular boss, right? For lack of, to put it plain, right? And so your contract is between this body of faculty and this entity, right? So if I have, like, you know, I am a unionized faculty member, right? Member of our union, and my union, right, we bargain with the state system of higher education. They are the administration. They are the bosses, right? And so in order for my union contract to be there, it's with that group. Now, what we've seen in the private sector over and over and over again, some public sector of this too as well, is one of the ways of getting out of union contracts or busting unions is that you change the boss, right? And you basically say, they did this in Florida. Now, if you go back and read some of the stuff that we wrote on Raging Chicken years ago, and even talked about on this show, we talked about the former chancellor who came up here from Florida, but some of the, and we talked to some people in the Florida state system, the Florida State University system down there, about essentially them doing the same thing. Is what they did is they changed the governance structure and then said, well, look, you're no longer the entity that you were bargaining with, that you had a contract with, they no longer exist. So you no longer have a contract. If you know, we're not saying that you can't be unionized, but if you're going to be unionized, you have to form a new union. And your faculty are not even the same faculty, right? Because now you have all these community college faculty members too as well. So your working body is different. So you can't say that ABSCUF, my faculty union, represents all these folks. As a matter of fact, some of those community colleges have contracts with American Federation of Teachers. Some of those contract with the AAUP, right? So you don't even have the same unions. So if you want to have, you know, a union, you're going to have to reorganize your union, and you have to start a union drive all the way over. Now, I am not saying this is going to happen. And I'm also not saying that there's higher education union leaders have already been, this has been already on their radar. I'm sure it is. I know it is. But that's one of those questions that kind of comes up. It's like, whoa, this is a big deal, right? For union work in the state. Okay. So that's one thing. Amy, what's going on? Welcome. A second caveat here. I want to go to the press release here for two things. So in the governor's press release, and this came out on, again, January 26th, about his new proposal, right? Some of the things we already covered. But then he says, under this third point, increasing transparency and improving outcomes. Third, now I'm quoting, Governor Shapiro believes Pennsylvania should pay for performance. That's why he's proposing that direct appropriations to publicly funded colleges and universities be distributed on the basis of a predictable, transparent, outcomes-focused formula that will incentivize colleges and universities to focus on what is most important to the Commonwealth. A performance-based funding model has already been embraced by higher education leaders across the Commonwealth, including Penn State President Neeli Bendabudi. Okay? In consultation with higher education stakeholders, the Shapiro administration will establish a predictable, performance-based funding formula that rewards public and state-related colleges and universities for achieving outcomes that benefit the Commonwealth. Right? And kind of it goes on. So, well, I'll read the rest of it so you don't think I'm taking it out of context. The formula will take into consideration factors including but not limited to increasing enrollment, the number of first-generation college students that receive credentials, and the graduation rate. Furthermore, the formula will incentivize institutions to recruit and support students to complete degrees and earn credentials in fields facing workforce shortages such as education and nursing, and growing fields like advanced manufacturing and biotechnology that will drive Commonwealth economic growth in decades to come. right? Finally, Governor Shapiro will ensure this performance-based funding formula is driven out through the Pennsylvania Department of Education for state-related universities. This will no longer require a 2/3 vote in the legislature, breaking the cycle of political gamesmanship that has held funding hostage. Okay, so again, all of this on its surface, right, sounds fine until you start looking at some of the history of what quote unquote performance-based funding looks like. Performance-based funding models can often be utilized to turn education and other professions for that matter into standardized testing regimes, right? Even though it's not standardized, but turn them into these standardized regimes in which monitoring by the state, monitoring by these government or non-state actors, however they're going to do this, right? About what they perceive as essential to education. Now, if you looked at what happened, and what does that mean? That means that what has already happened in K through 12 education, where a good chunk of your child's education, if you have kids, a good chunk of that year is spent on preparing them for the test. Why? Because there's an outcomes performance-based model for K through 12 that says these schools need to basically demonstrate that they are performing, right? And if they succeed, right, then they will kind of get their funding. Those who do not succeed will be punished, right? And in some cases, shut down, right? Those are extreme cases, of course, but that's the whole idea. And so teachers, administrators, school districts put a quarter of the school year, a third of the school year, they focus on gearing up students for those tests so that they can demonstrate their performance. And I'm not going to go into this all now. There is a libraries full of research on how this has helped decimate public education, the damage it has done to public education. It was all done with great language and words, right? It was all done with the best intentions. Right? It was all done to leave no child behind. But what that translated into is a educational industry, like industrial complex, right? It's built around standardized testing regimes who now have financial incentives in order to kind of demonstrate that their product actually measures this thing called performance. When most of the qualitative research that's out there and all the research out there suggests that it has had a negligible effect at best on the ability of once you start comparing American students, when you start comparing to students in other countries who do not rely upon this kind of like rigorous like testing regime. The same thing that has gone on in K through 12 has also happened in medicine. And look, Arne Duncan, the Obama education guy, he was the champion of that model. He was the champion of the standardized testing regime. But they were always able to talk about it in this really glowing language of, we're trying to help everybody out. We're performance-based, because that sounds good to everybody. Until you realize what it does is it turns professionals, turns educators, it turns professionals into cogs into somebody else's machine. That doesn't mean that great work can't happen within that, but we've already felt this at Kutztown in higher education, where everything has already started moving in this direction, that the credentialing systems that give universities their accreditation are already looking at these outcome-based stuff. And the amount of time that I used to spend, even the first 10 years that I was at Kutztown University, the amount of time that has shifted from conversations about students and curriculum and program growth and all that to measurement outcomes, writing specific language to make sure it fits the outcome language of this stuff. The amount of time that is spent in assessment and outcomes based, this performance based things for the accreditation purposes is unbelievable. The kind of conversation I had in the first part of my career versus the conversation I had the second part of my years with my own colleagues is so vastly different. So much of our time is taken up with that. I've seen this happen in medicine too as well. Same exact thing. I remember seeing this happening, right, in medicine and saying, that's just what they did to us. And sure enough, they did it. They drove physicians out of the field. They drove nurses out of the field. They drove the medical professionals out of it because they couldn't freaking stand it anymore. They got into it to practice medicine, right? Got into it to be an educator, got into to be a scholar, got into to be an academic, and the screws got put in. And now suddenly what you're doing is that you are doing paperwork all day long to justify your existence on a daily basis. Your focus shifts away from the students, from the patients, to this testing regime. And the worst part about it, I saw this happen. What drove my mom out of education. She was a kindergarten teacher in the inner cities of Utica, New York. And all the things that she used to do in her classroom, she'll tell you this over and over again. All the things that she did in that kindergarten school, like she said, those kids, they need just attention. They need people to take care of them. They need people to kind of like listen to them and spend time with them and build this community, right? That kind of give them opportunities. When they started coming into her kindergarten class and saying, no, you can't do that anymore because we need you to start training them to take these tests. That's when she knew she had to leave. She retired early. She got out early because she just could not handle it anymore. She's like, this is not why I ever got into education. It's the same thing I find myself saying now about higher education. So again, I'm not trying to suggest that this is what Shapiro is doing. However, I am concerned for a couple of reasons. Number one, Shapiro is cut from that same kind of cloth that those Obama administration officials were, that basically did all this kind of outcome-based performance stuff in medicine and in education, which has had detrimental effects upon the people who actually practice them, with no demonstrable, significant improvement in what they set out to improve. They have a hell of a lot more data now, but they haven't actually done what they're doing. As a matter of fact, in many cases, what's happened, they've changed what we call education to mean the outcomes on these tests. And Shapiro that's his shtick. Right? Remember, Shapiro is a guy who's been wide open to the charter school industry. He's someone who's like had a kind of, love-hate relationship with the big money folks that like to charterize K through 12 schools. He's bought into some of that. Now, some people tell me that, okay, he's moved away from that a little bit. We shall see. The second reason why I'm concerned about that is because when I mentioned that part, I said, he's, a lot of this plan came out of these higher education professionals who, he's got his higher ed working group. Who's on that higher ed working group? Are these faculty members? I don't know, but here's the interesting thing. At the end of his press release, Shapiro's press release, he says, see what higher education, business, and government leaders are saying about Governor Shapiro's higher education blueprint. And this gives you a little bit of window into who has been in the room in defining this. The first person is, of course, Posse Chancellor Greenstein. So I'm not going to read you all their quotes in here, right? Well, no, actually, I'm going to read you Greenstein's, then I'm going to go down from here. Greenstein says this, quote, and this is Shapiro's press release, quote, PASHE's remarkable transformation over the past 6 years shows that a collaborative system is good for students, communities, and employers, and we know higher education can accomplish so much more by uniting. The governor's proposal is a real opportunity to build upon the strengths of PASHE universities and the community colleges. Together, we can create a new, larger system with better collaboration that gives students more pathways to degrees or credentials, rapidly adjusts to the changing knowledge and skills employers want, and provides the lowest cost option for students throughout their lifetime. PASHE Chancellor Greenstein. That first sentence, passage that a collaborative system is good for students, communities, and employers. I'll remind you of how chaotic and frustrating and devastating this quote unquote collaboration, consolidation of universities has been for those communities, for those faculty members, and for those students. But how many faculty members lost their jobs in that? Of how many students suddenly found out that they could, if they wanted to get their program, that they were going to have to do these online classes or commute an hour away for 1 or 2 classes a week, right? Communities who suddenly are kind of losing businesses, right? We talked about this on the show. We had independent studies that show the economic impact of what Chancellor Greenstein was basically doing. The economic impact was going to be devastating to a lot of these small communities, right? But man, does he know how to charm the pants of people in power. Oh, God, he does. He's got some skills, I'll tell you that. But so listen, so PASHE Chancellor Greenstein is one of the people that gives a quote and commentary here. Neeli Bendapudi, president of Penn State, gives a comment. Richard Englert, president of Temple University. Yeah, Temple University, right? How many presidents, the school with the kind of revolving presidents, right? But anyways, Richard Englert, president of Temple University. John Gable, chancellor, University of Pittsburgh. Dr. Brenda Allen, president, Lincoln University. Dr. Quinton Bullock, president, the Community College of Allegheny County. Dr. Ski Sigelski, president and CEO of HAC, right? Harrisburg Area Community College. By the way, that guy, Ski Sigelski, one of the biggest union busting presidents in the state, right? But he's given space to quote. Greg Scott, president and CEO, Chamber of Business Industry in Center County. James Grunke, president and CEO of Erie Regional Chamber of Growth and Partnership. Angela Harding, Clinton County Commissioner. And Jimmy Sabatino, Luzerne County Councilman. Those are the people who comment, who are given quotes in his press release. Not a single faculty member or everyday rank and file educator cited there as all. No voices of students, no voices of educational interest groups. Only the CEOs and presidents of those educational institutions, some of which have a horrific labor record. Temple University, HAC, looking at you. Right? So those are the reason I'm tapping my brakes on this a bit, okay? So, and my point is, I was hoping to find some critical assessment of this plan so far, but I haven't found a ton yet. So I'm going to look for some folks to come on the show to talk about what's happening in Shapiro's higher ed program. Now he's giving his state of the Commonwealth. God, when is he giving it? He's giving like the first week of February, I think, right? February 6th. Right. That's when he's going to give his budget talk. Basically, he's going to talk about his budget text. So we assume that there's going to be some more details in there, and that's going to be emerging over the next couple of years, or next couple of months. I'll also say that I was just on a call this afternoon. ABSCUF, my faculty union, we've been in contract negotiations. We've been working without a contract since June 30th. The State System of Higher Education and my union ABSCUF have finally come to an agreement in principle. We do not have actual language yet. They're supposedly working on some of these details. They came to an agreement in principle, so we should have a contract, assuming what they're relaying. I mean, there seems to be a pretty strong, I don't want to say sell, but an agreement at this point for people who were kind of in the know about what was happening in contract negotiations, that this seems to be a decent contract. You know, again, I'll wait till I see the language. But once that contract gets resolved, my guess is that we're going to be shifting gears pretty quickly into this higher ed proposal. So that obviously it's a personal interest to me, but also it's a suggesting of we're going to see some significant changes in what happens in Pennsylvania. I don't think that the state system of higher education is the only one. So anyways, that's the kind of third area of kind of people that I'm reaching out to right now to get on the show. So yes. Emily says, yes, wish Shapiro had gone the same route as Gretchen Whitmer had gone for pre-K and community college funding in Michigan. Yeah. I mean, look, we already had a proposal, you know, there, the PA promise was the whole idea as about, you know, tuition-free college for Pennsylvania residents in the state system of higher education for those families making $125,000 or less, right? Again, not a fan of these kind of like, you know, divisive kind of numbers. I'd much more prefer universal, you know, for everyone. Because look, you know, I've said this before on the show, and I think, you know, a lot of folks who come from the same bent as I do, look, it is true that if somebody is making, you know, their family is making $20 million a year, right? They don't need, they can afford to send their kids to college, right? And so some people will say, well, why should that person get a free education when they can afford to pay it, right? Why not, you know, that person, they should pay their own way, right? First thing I'll say is that chances are if somebody's making $20 million a year, right, they're not going to send their kid to one of the state system schools, period. Right? If they can afford to send their kid wherever they want, their kid's going to go wherever they want that kid to go. Right? Number one. So it's not like you're going to have a huge influx of rich folks that want to come to Kutztown. It's just not going to happen. Second thing is, because, well, let me be clear about that too. The reason why is people who make tons and tons of money, they know that the value of say like Ivy League schools and all that other kind of stuff and the most elite stuff. Yes, really good education, but the bang for their buck is that it's the networking opportunity, right? They know that when you got your kid comes out with a Harvard degree, that puts them into this whole network of kind of job that they're going to be taking care of, and they're already going to reproduce their class position, right? We know that already. So that's side. The second issue is though, let's say there are several rich folks, right, making $20 million a year that send their kids to the state system schools. So what? I mean, I think it's a good thing that people across the social, cultural, class divisions occupy the same spaces. Right? I think it could actually be a learning experience for someone who's basically never had to pick out their own clothes in their entire life. I said everything they ever wanted because their parents, it's a good thing for that person, that kid, to be in the same classroom as someone who's basically the first generation college students who are struggling to make ends meet. There's a benefit in that. It cuts down, in whatever limited way possible, it takes some bricks out of these walled off communities that we've gotten so used to living in. Is that so bad? I mean, is that worth, for me, that's what democracy promises, right? To be in a context in which you are not just like everybody, just like you, but you're contending with differences and challenges just of different, of lifestyles, of backgrounds, of histories, of experiences. That's the space that we need to be kind of constantly practicing and negotiating with each other. So I don't even get it at a practical level. The only reason, there's like two reasons that are only ever given, right? There's the they could afford it, you know, the kind of us them thing. They could afford it, so why should they get it for free, right? And the person who says that generally are generally the person that if they found themselves on the $72,000 a year side of that tuition break instead of on the $69,000 side, right? If they found themselves, oh, you're not going to get the tuition break because you make $2,000 too much per year, they're going to be the first one that are going to be pissed off, and that are going to be, you can count them to be voting against Shapiro in the next election, right? I think that's the way people's personal politics work. But if you make it say, this is what you get is by the nature of being someone from Pennsylvania. We're going to make sure that we have a cap of $1,000 per semester in the cost of tuition. Okay. We're all in. There's still going to be people who are going to disagree with that, but they can't. What's their ammunition? State, government, blah, 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 blah. Right? Yeah, the same old ideological chitter chatter, not the space that most people live in. But if I'm in a community, if I'm in a neighborhood, I can know that, hey, my kid, right? You know, this family here are making $69,000. Right, and that family, then their best friend lives up the street and their family makes $75,000 a year. That if they decide they want to go to the same college in the state system of higher education, then they're not going to find out that one of them gets to pay a cap of $1,000 per semester and the other one has to pay a full ride, right? Has to pay the full tuition bill. That pits people in the same community against one another. Now, again, the other argument for doing it is, well, just practically this is what we can do. And I'm willing to hear that, right? I'm willing to say, look, this is significant, right? If you can seriously cap the tuition for $1,000 per semester cost, that is totally significant and is going to catch. I would have to look at the numbers. I was about to say majority. I don't know if it's majority, but let's just say near majority of the college-bound folks. And it will make it possible for working class kids, poor kids, low to middle income kids, give them a pathway into higher education without saddling them with tons of debt. That's a huge achievement. So I don't want to kind of like forget that part of it. But I also think we need to look at the big picture here and see what's actually happening. My guess is like, look, Shapiro is a media darling, right? The official media kind of really like this guy. And so you're going to, especially once he's going to be he's already got this proposal about sweeping reform at PA funded higher education has already made national news. So there's going to be lots of people who are going to have him on TV to talk about how great he is and how this is transformative, and they're going to fawn over him. Our job is not to fawn. Our job is to be critical and to assess what's kind of going on. Right? Ideally, we're in a position that we find something out that's going to be deeply problematic that we're going to push. That we're going to make sure that if they consolidate all these universities, that there are going to be union faculty members at all of these universities. Things like that. But anyways, so there you go. That's a little bit of peek into some of the things I'm looking ahead for. I know that we've got another episode of The Signal coming out this week. I hope you caught the first one last week, or 2 weeks ago. Sorry, it was a really good show. From what I understand from Cyril Michaleko, the editor-in-chief over there at Bucks County Beacon, is that we've got in progress, the recording of the new episode of the Civic Circle, which I'm really looking forward to kind of getting my editing teeth into. and we should be good to go. You know, I'm looking forward to some good times. So the short of it is, I would love to hear people's perspectives too as well. I mean, you could hit us up on the Patreon discussion, or email at ragingchickenpress@gmail.com, or message me on Twitter, Facebook about what the hell we're going to do about how to kind of promote this show and other shows like it, because I'm getting it's becoming increasingly more difficult to spend any time on X whatsoever. Just, you know, I could go on for that. I'm not going to, but other alternatives like Blue Sky and Threads and Facebook and all this kind of stuff don't seem to be kind of really replacements for what Twitter once was. So I'm curious what we're going to do about that. So we shall see. Anyways, I'll keep you posted. So look at your socials for more information on what stuff that's coming up. I'll let you know what's happening next week. The plan is for this week to have a show on Friday. So we should be back here on Friday morning for a Friday Politics Roundup, just to kind of get the year started out right, as a way to kind of give you some more details about some upcoming shows, and to kind of check in to see what's happening in our communities. My tendency on Fridays will be to focus a little bit more locally. I'm probably thinking about spending a little time unpacking what's happening over in Souderton, because I know their folks are Souderton and Kutztown, because I know the folks are kind of their elections went the other way, right? Their elections went the wrong way for their school boards, and now they've got some of the extremists in their backyard. So there we go. Anyways, love to you all. Great to see folks out. Thanks again for all the work that everybody has been doing out there. Look forward to a great year ahead, and look forward to seeing you all throughout what we do here at Raging Chicken. You might have a little weird outro today because there's something wrong with my other music. So I'm going to hope that, you know what I need to do? Here, hold on. There we go. Hopefully this is going to get us where we need to go. Anyways, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. You can help us out and become a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head over to patreon.com/rcpress. And
I'm here with Maggie.
oh, that's not what I wanted. I want this one. All right, here we go. All right, everybody, we're out of here. Have a great night. Have a great week ahead of you. And hopefully we'll see you on the socials, and we'll see you this Friday right back here. All right, everybody.
Let me try my people.
See ya.
I guess I fly away now.